Hello, you fine ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing? I hope your day is going well. Today, we're going over is it 8? Maybe 7? I don't know. We're going over some tips and tricks on how to improve yourself in Fighter Squadron. That was oddly worded, but we're going to get started with tip number 1, which is be aware of your surroundings at all times. This is crucial in Fighter Squadron, especially knowing where your team is and where the enemy team is really, really important. Because if you are surrounded by your teammates, first of all, it's much easier to take out enemy ships, and second of all, if an enemy ship starts attacking you and you get locked onto, if you have some teammates nearby, they can easily take that ship out and you will be in a far better position. So really make sure you stick with your teammates in this game mode. It is very, very, very important. Just, you don't need to be right beside them, but just in their general area, be around your teammates and don't get completely surrounded by the enemy team, because that is never good. Now on to our next tip. You turn sharper when you're slower. Now I know you probably already know that. It's pretty basic physics, I guess, but it's just you can turn a lot sharper when you're going slower, so that is of course very useful. If an enemy ship does an evasive maneuver or turn sharply, you can also turn sharply and lock on once again. Or if you're doing like a dive towards the ground and you need to pull up because you're reenacting some scene from Star Wars, then that would also be very useful to slow down, and then you can turn sharper. Now, this can also be used as an evasive maneuver, but be sure that it's not your only evasive maneuver, because if someone is locking onto you and all you do is a sharp turn the other way, they're still going to be able to lock onto you. So make sure you do one of the preset maneuvers with the D-pad, or do some other evasive maneuver and then pull one of those, just to confuse them. But don't use that as your only evasive maneuver, because that is not going to work out too well. Now, this is also a pretty basic tip, but make sure you use power-ups, especially to regenerate health. They're actually very, very useful, especially if you're low on health. It's great to just go and pick up a power-up, because you are a much bigger target when you're low on health. Because in Fighter Squadron, you can really see quite easily how much health every player has, and you're easy pickings if you have low health. So definitely make sure you go and get a power-up to regen some of that health. It is very, very important. So also be on the lookout for hero pickups. I know that's also a very basic one, but do try to learn where they spawn if you play Fighter Squadron a lot, because heroes are incredible in Fighter Squadron, because they really, really have a lot of health and they can tank damage. But of course you do still need to be careful when playing as a hero, because again, if you get completely surrounded, heroes can go down quite quickly. Now, be wary when chasing an enemy, for you are far easier to shoot down and you're a far easier target when you're locking onto someone and trying to fire at them, because you're usually flying in a straight line when you're doing that. Now, the enemy is probably doing a bunch of evasive maneuvers, but the whole point of you locking onto them is you're trying to kind of stable your blasters and have a stable ground to fire at. So you're not really doing evasive maneuvers during the whole thing. So it's really, really important to just be careful and just be careful and make sure you're not being surrounded by enemies when you're locking onto one, because it is far easier for enemies to lock onto you, because again, you're just flying in a straight line when you're trying to lock onto the enemy. So definitely be careful and watch out for that. Now, this next tip is a little more advanced, and I don't know how well I'm going to be able to explain this, so brace yourself for some confusion waves. Now, the best way to take out an enemy fighter is when they are flying straight and not turning or doing evasive maneuvers. However, once they see that you're locking onto them, either with missiles or just with your blasters, because once you press that lock on button and that red circle appears, they can see that. Like, it tells them that someone is locking onto them. So once that happens, their movement becomes a little more erratic, because they're trying to shake off their pursuer. And they're trying to do evasive maneuvers and such. So when they do that, because it's far easier to take them when they're not doing evasive maneuvers, of course, and when they're just flying in a straight line, whenever they start to do that, try to deal as much damage as you can, but definitely don't go overheating your blasters, And don't stay locked on, because then they'll know you're still right there and they're going to keep doing evasive maneuvers. Instead, once they start acting really erratic and start doing a bunch of maneuvers, cease the lock on. Keep following them, but don't do the lock on, so that it seems to them like they succeeded in shaking off the pursuer, and then they will probably stop flying really like erratic and just go in a straight line again, and then you can lock on once more and take them out much easier. Also, fire missiles on this second lock-on attempt, or on a lock-on attempt once they've used their evasive maneuvers. So lock onto them, hopefully they will use an evasive maneuver, and then just break the lock, follow them after their evasive maneuver, and then lock onto them with the missiles, because it's far, far harder to evade the missiles if they don't have one of the preset maneuvers. So I know that was a little long and a little confusing, I'm very sorry, but hopefully that got across quite well, because it is very, very key to succeeding in Fighter Squadron. Now on to the last tip, and also a very crucial one. Do not overheat your blasters on your ship when you're firing at an enemy who is trying to evade you, whether with the actual maneuvers or just turning. Instead, fire a few bursts to see if you can deal damage, and then wait until your opponent straightens out, and usually that's when you cease the lock on, that they think they've shook their pursuer. And then once they straighten out, then you can fire your blasters properly and deal as much damage as you can. So that kind of ties into the last tip as well, but it's just when they're turning and when they're evading, get a few bursts off just to see if you can deal a little damage, and then break the lock, because you really don't want to overheat your blasters when they're not at their full potential, and they are at their full potential when the enemy is just flying straight. So that is very, very key as well. But that's all for today. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.